Chapter 4. Demand and Supply Applications. Chapter Objectives. You have 5 minutes to read summary, P81, and then, there will be a short quiz. Chapter Objectives. 1. What are the two main functions that prices perform in market economies? How do they address the three main questions: what gets produced, how are they produced, and who gets the products? How do prices transmit information about changing consumer wants and resource availability? 2. How do prices ration goods? Why must goods be rationed? What are other means of rationing besides price? Are these other methods fairer than using price? Chapter Objectives. 3. If the price of a good is kept below the market price through the use of a government-imposed price control, how can the total cost end up exceeding the supposedly higher market price? 4. How can supply and demand be used as a tool for analysis? 5. How is market efficiency related to demand and supply? Chapter Objectives Answers. 1. What are the two main functions that prices perform in market economies? How do they address the three main questions: what gets produced, how are they produced, and who gets the products? How do prices transmit information about changing consumer wants and resource availability? In market economies, prices answer the three main questions that any economic system must address. Prices do this by performing two main functions: rationing the goods and services that are produced and allocating the resources used to produce them. The question of who gets the goods and services that are produced is answered by the rationing function that prices perform. Products are rationed according to willingness and ability to pay the market prices for products. The questions of what gets produced and how they are produced are answered by the allocative function that prices perform. Prices transmit information between consumers and producers. Changes in consumers' desires and changing resource scarcity are signaled by the changing prices of goods and resources. Chapter Objectives Answer. 2. How do prices ration goods? Why must goods be rationed? What are other means of rationing besides price? Are these other methods fairer than using price? All scarce goods must be rationed somehow. Because goods are not freely available to everyone who wants them, some people will get certain goods and others will not. Rationing invariably discriminates against someone. Rationing by price discriminates against people with a low ability or willingness to pay the market price. Sometimes, other rationing mechanisms are employed, such as queuing. Chapter Objectives. 3. If the price of a good is kept below the market price through the use of a government-imposed price control, how can the total cost end up exceeding the supposedly higher market price? When employing other ways of rationing goods, we should keep in mind that every rationing mechanism discriminates against someone and can result in wasted resources. For example, queuing often leads to long lines and wasted time and discriminates against people on the basis of the opportunity cost of their time. The total cost will often exceed what would have been paid in a free market. Chapter Objectives. 4. How can supply and demand be used as a tool for analysis? The basic logic of supply and demand is a powerful tool for analysis. For example, supply and demand analysis show that an oil import tax will reduce the quantity of oil demanded, increase domestic production and generate revenues for the government. Chapter Objectives. 5. How is market efficiency related to demand and supply? Supply and demand curve used to illustrate the idea of market efficiency, an important aspect of normative economics. The price system. Rationing and allocating resources. The market system performs two important and closely related functions. Resource allocation. The market system determines the allocation of resources among producers and the final mix of outputs. The price system. Rationing and allocating resources. The market system performs two important and closely related functions. Price rationing. A decrease in supply creates a shortage at the original price. Price rationing. There is some price that will clear any market. Constraints on the market. A price ceiling is a maximum price that sellers may charge for a good, usually set by government. In 1974, the government set a price ceiling to distribute the available supply of gasoline. At an imposed price of 57 cents per gallon, the result was excess demand. Alternative rationing mechanisms. Queuing is a non-price rationing system that uses waiting in line as a means of distributing goods and services. Alternative rationing mechanisms. Favored customers are those who receive special treatment from dealers during situations when there is excess demand. Ration coupons are tickets or coupons that entitle individuals to purchase a certain amount of a given product per month. Alternative rationing mechanisms. Attempts to restrict prices often result in the evolution of a black market. A black market is a market in which illegal trading takes place at market-determined prices. Alternative rationing mechanisms. The problem with rationing systems is that excess demand is created but not eliminated. No matter how good the intentions of private organizations and governments, it is very difficult to prevent the price system from operating and to stop the willingness to pay from asserting itself. Prices and the allocation of resources. Price changes resulting from shifts of demand cause profits to rise or fall. Profits attract capital, losses lead to disinvestment. Higher wages attract labor and encourage workers to acquire skills. At the core of the system, supply, demand, and prices in input and output markets determine the allocation of resources and the ultimate combinations of things produced. Price floors. A price floor is a minimum price below which exchange is not permitted. The most common example of a price floor is the minimum wage, which is a floor set under the price of labor. The result of setting a price floor will be excess supply, or higher quantity supplied than quantity demanded. Supply and demand analysis. An oil import fee. At a world price of $18, imports are 5.9 million barrels per day. Supply and demand. And market efficiency. Supply and demand curves can be used to illustrate the idea of market efficiency, an important aspect of normative economics. Consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is the difference between the maximum amount a person is willing to pay for a good and its current market price. Consumer surplus. Some consumers are willing to pay as much as $5 each for hamburgers. Since the price is only $2.50, they receive a consumer surplus of $2.50. Consumer surplus. Others are willing to pay something less than $5 but more than $2.50. Consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve and above the price level. Producer surplus. Producer surplus is the difference between the maximum amount a producer is willing to accept to supply a good and its current market price. Producer surplus. Some producers are willing to accept as little as 75 cents each for hamburgers. Since the price is $2.50, they receive a producer surplus of $1.75 per hamburger. Producer surplus. Others producers are willing to receive something less than $5 but higher than 75 cents. Producer surplus is the area above the supply curve and below the price level. Markets maximize the sum of producer and consumer surplus. Total producer and consumer surplus is highest where supply and demand curves intersect at equilibrium. Consumers receive benefits in excess of what they pay and producers receive compensation in excess of costs. Markets maximize the sum of producer and consumer surplus. If the market produces too little, say 4 million instead of 7 million hamburgers per month, total producer and consumer surplus is reduced. This reduction, triangle ABC, is called a deadweight loss. Potential causes of deadweight loss from under and overproduction. Deadweight losses can occur from under and overproduction. If the market produces 10 million instead of 7 million hamburgers per month, the cost of production rises above the willingness of consumers to pay, resulting in a deadweight loss. Fill in blanks. 1. N underscore is a minimum legal price mandated by government. 2. N underscore is a maximum price mandated by government.